You don't belong here. Move to the back before I call security. Nora's voice rang out loud and clear through the first-class cabin, slicing through the air like a blade. Every head turned. Silence followed. Mia Johnson sat still in seat 2A, her hands calmly folded in her lap, her eyes steady. She didn't flinch. But the damage had already been done. The words, laced with disrespect, soaked in arrogance, left passengers stunned. A few gasped. Others pretended to look away, but no one could unhear it. A flight attendant had just tried to eject a black woman from first class, not for safety, not for a mistake, but simply because she was there, and she was black. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. And if this scene already has your blood boiling, give it a like to help more people hear the truth. Now, let's begin. Mia Johnson was no stranger to injustice, but she hadn't expected it to punch her in the face at 3,000 feet. She had boarded the flight from Chicago to New York like any other passenger, ticket in hand, shoulders straight, purpose in her step, dressed in a sleek, tailored navy blue suit and carrying nothing but a leather tote and her laptop. Mia looked every bit the executive she was, but to some, that still wasn't enough. Not for first class, not for someone like her. She was flying to New York to attend a major press conference. Her company, Autotech Innovations, was set to announce a revolutionary breakthrough in electric vehicle battery technology. It was the kind of announcement that could reshape the future of transportation. And Mia, its 42-year-old black CEO, was the face of it all. But that day, she wasn't just a CEO, she was a target. Seat 2A welcomed her with quiet comfort. She opened her laptop and began reviewing her notes, unaware that a storm was brewing just 2 seats away. Ava Harper, a wealthy white woman in her 50s, sat beside her husband Ethan in 2B and 2C, drenched in designer labels and entitlement. Ava couldn't take her eyes off Mia. She leaned toward Ethan and whispered, just loud enough to be heard. "People like her don't belong up here," Ethan chuckled, not discreetly. "Guess anyone can buy a first-class seat these days," he said. Mia didn't look up. She'd heard worse. She'd endured worse. But still, the sting of being othered never went away. Ava wasn't done. She stood, adjusted her pearl necklace, and turned to Mia. "Excuse me," she said with fake sweetness. "You're in the wrong seat. This section is reserved for premium travelers." Mia looked up, polite but firm. "This is my seat. 2A. I have my ticket right here." She held it up, cool and clear. Ava's lips curled. Must be a mistake. She waved down a flight attendant. Nora, young, inexperienced, and clearly intimidated by Ava's air of authority. Nora walked over. "Is everything okay here?" Ava didn't skip a beat. "This woman is in the wrong seat. I need you to move her." Nora turned to Mia. "Ma'am, can I see your ticket, please?" Mia handed it over, expression unchanged. Nora glanced at it, hesitated, then looked back at Ava, who subtly slipped a folded bill into her hand. 3 crisp $100 bills. Nora froze, then cleared her throat. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. It looks like there's been a booking error. You'll have to move to economy." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Mia blinked. "A booking error? No, that's not true." She took a breath. "I am not moving. I paid for this seat, and I have every right to be here." Ava stepped closer, her voice venomous now. "Do yourself a favor and leave. First class isn't for people like you," Ethan added. "You're embarrassing yourself." Mia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Nora squirmed. "Ma'am, please." But before she could finish, another passenger stood up, a white man in his 60s. "Enough," he said. "This woman has a ticket. She's not going anywhere." His name was Harper, no relation to Ava. Another man stood beside him. Nathan. "It's 2024, he said loudly, "and this nonsense needs to stop." But Ava didn't stop. She narrowed her eyes, stepped so close to Mia their knees nearly touched. She whispered, "You think you're better than us? Sitting here in your little suit? Let's see what happens when you're gone." She turned back to Nora, voice rising. "Do your job." Mia stayed calm, but her instincts flared. Something wasn't right. Something was about to go very wrong, and then it did. Ava's hand slipped behind her back, searching for something. No, not a weapon. Worse, her wallet. She pulled out more cash. Not for Nora this time, just a show of power, a reminder of who she thought she was. And with a cold sneer, she whispered to Nora again, "Get her out of my sight, or I'll make sure this airline regrets it." Nora nodded, hesitant, nervous, but still complicit. Mia saw it. She read it in the girl's eyes, and she knew. This wasn't just a bad moment. This was the beginning of a battle, one she hadn't asked for, one she couldn't walk away from. She sat back, folded her arms, and waited, not afraid, but ready. Because Mia Johnson had been underestimated her whole life, and she was done being polite about it. Nora came back, this time with more confidence. Though the shake in her hands gave her away, she had accepted the bribe. Now, she had to carry it out. "Ms. Johnson," she said, voice firmer than before. "There's been an internal booking error. I need you to move to another seat in economy. We apologize for the inconvenience." Mia looked up slowly, eyes calm, voice steady. "No, I'm not moving. I paid for this seat. I have my confirmation, my ticket, and my dignity. I will not be dismissed." Ava Harper stood right behind Nora, arms crossed, smirking like she'd already won. "You heard her," Ava said to the cabin. "She refuses to cooperate. Do you see how difficult she's being?" Ethan stepped beside his wife and added, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, "She's trying to start something. Typical." Nora looked back and forth between Mia and the Harpers, clearly overwhelmed. "Ma'am," she said again, "I really must insist." But Mia didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "Then I'd like to speak to the captain." Passengers stirred now. The murmurs grew louder. A few turned to whisper in disbelief. A white man a few rows back, Harper, stood up and faced the scene. "Why are you asking her to leave when she has a valid ticket?" he asked. "You're creating the problem, not her." Ava shot him a sharp look. "Stay out of it." Harper didn't back down. "No, this is wrong." Another passenger, Nathan, joined in. "This is blatant discrimination," he said. "We all see it." Mia stayed in her seat, composed, but her heart was beating fast, not with fear, but with fire. This wasn't the first time she'd been humiliated in a public space, but this was different. She wasn't a kid being followed in a store. She wasn't an intern being ignored in a meeting. She was a CEO. She was a shareholder in this very airline, and she was being told to leave her seat because someone didn't like the color of her skin. Ava turned to the other passengers, pleading her case with an air of false victimhood. "We paid extra for peace. This is not peaceful. She's making a scene," Ethan added. "There are protocols. She clearly doesn't understand how first class works." But Mia had had enough. She turned and looked Ava directly in the eyes. "I understand perfectly. You just don't like that I'm sitting here." Ava's lips twitched with rage. "You think you're better than us?" she hissed. "You dress the part, but deep down, you know this isn't your world." Mia's voice stayed even. "That's where you're wrong. I built my world, brick by brick, and I'm not giving up my seat." Behind the calm exterior, Mia's mind flashed back to where it all began. She was a girl in Detroit. Her mother, a janitor by night and nursing assistant by day, raised 3 kids alone after her father died in a factory fire. Mia was the oldest. She took care of her siblings while her mother worked double shifts. She taught herself to code on a beat-up desktop from the church donation bin. She studied under streetlights when the power got cut off. She earned a scholarship to MIT. She launched auto tech innovations from her garage. She had faced every door slammed in her face and knocked again until one opened. That's how she became a tech mogul. That's how she earned this seat, fair and square. But Ava didn't care. She didn't care about Mia's story. She only saw skin and status. She stepped forward, voice growing shriller. "This is your last warning. Move now, or we'll make you move." Mia looked at Nora. "Call the captain," she said quietly. "Now." Nora hesitated. "He's busy." Mia narrowed her eyes. "Then I suggest you make time." At that moment, Ryan, a black man in his 30s seated across the aisle, pulled out his phone and began recording. "The world needs to see this," he muttered. Ava snapped her fingers at him. "Turn that off," she barked. Ryan didn't even blink. "Nah, let's keep going. This is history happening." Then came the boiling point. Ava, livid and losing control, stepped forward. "You think you're untouchable?" she said. And then she slapped Mia. Hard. A crack echoed through the cabin. Time stopped. Nora gasped. Passengers froze. Ryan's camera shook slightly, but kept rolling. Mia didn't move. Her head had snapped slightly from the force, but she turned back to face Ava. Her cheek burned, but her dignity remained unbroken. The cabin was dead silent, every breath held in suspense. Harper stepped forward. "That's assault," he said loudly. "You just committed assault," Nathan added. "She needs to be removed, immediately." But Ava, still breathing heavily, shouted, "She deserved it. She was threatening me. She was aggressive." Ethan tried to pull her back. "Ava, sit down," he whispered harshly, but the damage was done. Mia pressed the call button above her seat. "Get the captain," she said again, voice steel cold now. Nora tried to calm the situation, tried to plead. "Let's not escalate this." But she was too late. The cockpit door opened. Captain Kevin, a tall black man in his early 50s, stepped out. His eyes scanned the scene. He took in the flushed faces, the frozen expressions, the cell phone still recording. Then his eyes landed on Mia. He paused. Recognition sparked. "Ms. Johnson," he said. His voice dropped slightly, now laced with both concern and respect. "Are you all right?" The entire cabin turned to look at him. Nora looked like she might faint. Ethan swallowed hard. Ava went pale. Mia nodded once. "I'm fine, but this situation is not—" Kevin looked at Nora. "Step aside." Then he faced Ava and Ethan. "You assaulted a passenger," he said firmly. "And not just any passenger. Ms. Johnson is a shareholder of this airline, 10% owner, to be exact." Gasps spread through the cabin. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Ava's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ethan's eyes widened. He stepped back, as if distance could save him. Kevin continued, "Ms. Johnson is not only staying in her seat, but I will personally see that justice is served on this flight. Nora, you're relieved. A replacement attendant will be sent up immediately." He turned to Mia. "Would you like to press charges?" Mia didn't answer yet, not because she doubted, but because she was choosing the moment. With the whole cabin watching, the cameras rolling, and Truth finally standing tall in uniform, she simply said, "Let's handle it properly, but yes, this won't be forgotten." Captain Kevin nodded. Understood. And just like that, the story shifted. The slap still hung in the air like a thunderclap that refused to fade. Even as the minutes ticked by, no one moved. The tension in the first-class cabin was so thick it could have choked the oxygen out of the plane. Mia Johnson sat tall, face still stinging from Ava Harper's palm, but her pride untouched. She didn't touch her cheek. She didn't cry. She didn't retaliate. Instead, she stared ahead with quiet power, while the rest of the cabin sat stunned, their mouths open, their silence louder than any scream. And then, Ryan, seated just across the aisle, broke that silence with the steady click of his phone recording. "This is going viral," he muttered, his eyes burning with disbelief. "Every soul on this plane's gonna see what just happened." Ava didn't even flinch. Her chest heaved with self-righteous anger as she barked back at him. "She brought this on herself." Her voice cracked. "People like her think they can get away with anything these days." Ethan tried to pull her back into her seat, whispering harshly, "Stop. You've done enough." But it was too late. The mask had slipped, and the whole cabin had seen the face beneath it. Mia pressed the call button, her movements slow and composed, like a judge calling the courtroom to order. Her words were simple but weighty. "Get the captain." Nora, pale as paper, stepped back as if she'd been burned. Her eyes flickered with regret, but not enough to make it right. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but before a single word escaped. The cockpit door opened. Captain Kevin emerged. He didn't rush. He didn't storm out in a panic. He walked with the kind of quiet command that needed no introduction. He wore his authority like armor, but it wasn't his uniform that drew the cabin's attention. It was his face, calm, sharp, deeply focused, and unmistakably black. He scanned the cabin. He didn't need to ask what happened. The energy told the story. He saw Nora trembling. He saw Ava flushed with rage. He saw Mia, still, silent, dignified. But when his eyes landed on her, something shifted. His brows rose slightly. "Ms. Johnson?" he said, the words slow and clear. And in that moment, the air cracked open. You could hear the realization sweep through the plane like a wave. Nora's lips parted. Ava froze. Ethan blinked. "Wait, you know her?" Ava asked, her voice suddenly unsure, faltering. Captain Kevin nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "I do. Miss Johnson is a respected business leader, a key investor. She owns 10% of this airline." He paused. "And she has every right to sit in any seat she chooses." The weight of those words fell heavy and final. Passengers began whispering again, but this time, the tone had changed. A few clapped. Someone muttered, "Good, it's about time." Ryan never stopped recording. Ava's smirk disappeared, replaced with a deep frown. Her cheeks, once glowing with pride, now flushed with fear. "This is ridiculous," she stammered. "I didn't know who she was." Kevin turned to her, voice calm but firm. "You didn't need to know. Her humanity should have been enough." He then turned to Nora. "You accepted a bribe. You mishandled a valid boarding ticket, and you stood by while a passenger was physically assaulted." Nora's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean to." But Kevin cut her off. "You're done. Step aside." Mia finally rose from her seat, slowly, with grace. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gloat. She looked at Nora, then Ava, then Ethan. "This wasn't just about a seat," she said softly. "This was about power, about prejudice, and about how far people will go to protect their illusion of superiority." Her words didn't yell. They echoed, deep and slow, the kind that stick in your bones. "You thought I didn't belong here because I didn't look like you. But I don't need your approval. I earned my seat long before I walked onto this plane." Kevin nodded in agreement. "Ms. Johnson, would you like to file an official report?" he asked. "Yes," Mia replied, without hesitation. "And I want them removed." Ava gasped. "You can't do that. We have rights." Kevin stepped forward, pulling out a small notepad. "Not after assaulting another passenger, not after disrupting the flight, not after violating policy." He turned to the intercom. "I'll be informing the control tower. We're diverting to Philadelphia. Security will meet us on the ground. Ethan buried his face in his hands. Ava began to shake. This can't be happening, she whispered. She's lying. This is a setup. Harper, the white passenger who had spoken up earlier, stood again. No, Ava, he said, loud enough for all to hear. This is justice, and it's long overdue. Nathan clapped once, then twice. Others joined in, slow, steady applause that wasn't just for Mia, but for the truth. Emily, another flight attendant, entered the cabin quietly, replacing Nora. She nodded at Mia, her expression apologetic but professional. Ms. Johnson, I'll be taking care of you from here on, she said gently. Mia gave a polite nod. She didn't need sympathy. She needed accountability. And that's exactly what was unfolding. At last. As Captain Kevin returned to the cockpit, passengers leaned toward one another, whispering, replaying every moment. Ryan uploaded the first clip to X, captioned simply, "Black CEO slapped in first class. Watch what happens next." Within seconds, it began to spread. Ava slumped in her seat, clutching her purse like it could save her. Ethan looked out the window, already checking for damage control. But the real damage had already been done. And this time, it wasn't Mia who would pay the price. Mia sat back down in seat 2A, the same seat, the same posture. But now, the whole cabin knew exactly who she was. Captain Kevin stood at the front of the first-class cabin, his voice calm but authoritative as he addressed the entire section. Ladies and gentlemen, we've made a decision. Due to a violation of airline policy and the assault of a passenger, we will be making an emergency stop in Philadelphia. Security will escort 2 individuals off this flight. He didn't have to say their names. All eyes turned to Ava and Ethan Harper, who now sat rigid in their seats, their entitled arrogance rapidly dissolving into visible panic. Ava's jaw dropped, the reality finally sinking in. "You're removing us?" she spat. "Do you have any idea who we are?" Kevin responded without hesitation. "Yes, and that's exactly why you're getting off this plane." Ethan leaned in, whispering something to Ava, maybe to calm her, maybe to remind her to keep quiet, but she wouldn't have it. "This is an outrage," she cried, rising to her feet. "She provoked me. This woman," she pointed at Mia, her voice trembling, "is playing the victim. She doesn't belong here in the first place." The words landed with a heavy thud in the now silent cabin. Mia didn't rise. She didn't flinch. She simply turned her head, looked Ava in the eyes, and said, "You said that before, and yet, here I am." The weight of that sentence wasn't in its volume. It was in the stillness that followed. Even the hum of the engines seemed to hush itself in respect. Ryan, phone in hand, kept recording. Every second, he whispered to no one in particular. The world needs to see this kind of reckoning. Nora, standing awkwardly to the side, looked like she wanted to vanish. Her eyes were red, her hands nervously clutching the edge of the service cart, but there was no way out. Captain Kevin turned to her next. "Flight Attendant Nora Jacobs," he said formally, "you are hereby relieved of your duties effective immediately. Your actions today violated multiple federal aviation and company regulations." Nora's lower lip quivered. "Please," she begged. "I didn't know. I was just doing what I was told." But Kevin stood firm. "You were told to accept a bribe. You were told to harass a valid passenger. You had a choice, and you made the wrong one." The words hit like a gavel slamming down. Emily, the new attendant, stepped forward and gently placed her hand on Mia's shoulder. "Ms. Johnson, can I offer you anything?" she asked, her voice warm, sincere. "Water? A warm towel?" Mia shook her head. "Just silence, for now," she replied. "Let the rest of this play out." And it did. The captain returned to the cockpit, his message clear. No more negotiations. The decision was final. As the plane began its descent into Philadelphia, the mood shifted. Some passengers whispered about what they had witnessed. Some offered nods of support in Mia's direction. Others avoided her gaze, ashamed by their own silence earlier. But the ones who mattered, Harper, Nathan, Ryan, they stayed alert, present, standing in quiet solidarity. Ava, meanwhile, was unraveling. She paced the aisle, muttering to herself, "They can't do this to us. I'll call the press. I'll sue this entire airline," Ethan hissed. "Just sit down, Ava. You're making it worse." But she didn't listen. She was too far gone for people like her. Losing control wasn't just uncomfortable, it was catastrophic. And now, stripped of power, exposed before strangers and a rolling camera, she couldn't handle it. The moment the wheels touched down in Philadelphia, tension surged like a second engine roaring to life. The seatbelt sign pinged, and within seconds, uniformed airport security officers boarded the aircraft. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper," one officer said, stepping into the cabin. "Please come with us." Ava clutched the armrest. "No, I didn't do anything wrong." Ethan rose, defeated. "Let's just go. Ava," he said through clenched teeth. "It's over." But Ava wasn't finished. As the officer reached for her, she threw her drink onto the floor and shouted, "You'll regret this, all of you." Her voice cracked, desperate now. She turned to Mia one last time. "This isn't over." Mia met her eyes, unshaken. "For you, maybe not. But for me, it just began." With that, Ava and Ethan were escorted off the plane, their designer coats trailing behind them like torn flags of lost privilege. Nora followed, silent and sobbing, her flight attendant badge removed, her career ending in a walk of shame, as the cabin doors shut and the aircraft prepared to resume its route. A hush fell over first class. Ryan uploaded a second clip, the video now titled, "White Couple Removed After Assaulting Black CEO on Plane." Within minutes, the views were rising, tens of thousands turning into hundreds of thousands. People were sharing, commenting, tagging major news outlets. It was no longer just a flight, it was a national moment. Emily resumed her duties, offering passengers refreshments, but always checking on Mia with quiet care. Harper leaned over and said, "Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for standing your ground," Nathan added. "You gave us all permission to stop being silent." Mia exhaled, slow and deep. The fight had drained her, not just the slap, not just the humiliation, but the years of enduring it, the quiet racism at board meetings, the double takes when she entered luxury spaces, the questions about whether she really belonged. But now, something had shifted, not just in this cabin, but in the world watching outside it. As the plane lifted off again, bound for New York, Mia closed her eyes and leaned back in her seat. The same seat they tried to take from her, the same seat they thought she didn't deserve. But here she was, still seated, still dignified, still unbroken. The aircraft cabin felt different after the Harpers and Nora were removed in Philadelphia. The air was lighter, quieter, almost reverent. The tension that had once pulsed through every row had settled into reflection. Like everyone on board was still trying to process what they had just witnessed. But for Mia Johnson, sitting again in seat 2A with her back straight and eyes forward, this wasn't just an incident. This was the moment a long-ignored injustice had finally been held accountable in real time. In public view, the seat that Ava tried to steal, the dignity Nora tried to undermine, the humanity Ethan dismissed. None of it had been taken. Not today, because today, Mia stood her ground. And now, the world was watching. Emily, the replacement flight attendant, moved gracefully through the aisle, her professionalism unwavering but her tone noticeably warmer around Mia. "Ms. Johnson," she said, crouching slightly beside her. If there's anything I can do to make the rest of this flight more comfortable, please don't hesitate. Mia gave a small nod. Thank you, she said simply. That was enough. Emily didn't press. She knew when to serve, and when to simply respect. Meanwhile, Ryan's phone buzzed with non-stop notifications. The first video, showing Nora asking Mia to leave first class and Ava's heated demands, had already hit 5 million views on TikTok. The second, capturing Ava's slap and the arrival of Captain Kevin, was now over 10 million on X. News outlets were tagging his account, activists were sharing it, celebrities were commenting. The hashtag Maya Johnson was now trending worldwide. The backlash had begun. Down on the tarmac, Ava and Ethan were dealing with a very different reality. Their protests meant nothing to the Philadelphia airport police. Ava's shouting did little more than echo against the terminal walls as she was escorted into a private room for questioning. Ethan's calm facade was cracking. His calls to their attorneys weren't going through fast enough, and the stares from airline staff as they passed were no longer admiring. They were condemning. Word was spreading fast, and soon. It would reach their real estate clients, their investors, and their board, back on the plane. Captain Kevin made an announcement over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during the unexpected delay. We are now en route to New York. I want to personally commend the courage and dignity shown by Ms. Johnson and the support offered by several passengers during today's incident. Discrimination has no place in our skies, or anywhere else. The cabin responded with light applause, not forced, not performative, but honest. Harper clapped the loudest. Nathan followed. Even those who had stayed silent earlier now found the courage to join in. Mia didn't smile. Not yet. She appreciated the gesture, but she wasn't here for applause. She was here for justice. And justice wasn't about a moment. It was about consequences. Those consequences came swiftly. Within hours of landing in New York, news outlets had already run with the story. Black CEO slapped in first class. The headlines read, "Couple removed mid-flight after racial incident." Ryan's footage aired on national television. Ava and Ethan's faces were everywhere, frozen in screenshots mid-tirade. Reporters dug up details about their real estate firm, past lawsuits, questionable partnerships, elitist boardroom behavior. Clients began pulling out of contracts. A luxury hotel chain announced it was cutting ties. Stockholders held emergency meetings. The Harpers had built their empire on image, and now that image was collapsing under the weight of its own ugliness. Nora's fall was no less dramatic. After the airline issued a public statement condemning her actions, she was officially terminated. Her name was blacklisted in internal industry networks. Her certifications were flagged, one by one. Her applications for other airlines were rejected. Her career in the skies was over. She had chosen a bribe over her oath to serve every passenger equally, and that decision had cost her everything. Mia, meanwhile, remained quiet. For now, she had lawyers. Yes, but she also had patience. She didn't go straight to the media circus. She met with her legal team and reviewed the footage, frame by frame. The evidence was clear. She had every right to press charges against Ava for assault, and she did. A civil lawsuit was filed for defamation, emotional distress, and battery. And because the videos showed everything, the bribe, the slap, the public humiliation, it was an open and shut case. But Mia wasn't interested in vengeance. She was interested in impact. So when her legal team negotiated a multi-million-dollar settlement from Ava and Ethan Harper, she didn't hoard it. She announced, just days later, that a large portion of the funds would be donated to a scholarship foundation she'd created in her mother's name. The Denise Johnson STEM Scholars Fund would provide full tuition and mentorship to Black students pursuing careers in tech, engineering, and aviation. Because education, Mia said at the press conference, was how I earned this seat, and now I want others to know. They belong here too. Back on the flight, as the skyline of New York City came into view, Emily returned to Mia one last time. "We'll be landing shortly," she said. "If you'd prefer to disembark privately, we've arranged for that." Mia looked out the window for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I'll exit like everyone else." Emily smiled. "As you wish." When the plane touched down and the doors opened, a quiet hush fell over the cabin. Then, as Mia stood, passengers began to clap, not for drama, not for show, but for the strength they had witnessed, for the grace she had shown when others would have screamed. Ryan lowered his phone, not filming anymore, just present. Harper stepped aside to let Mia pass, his hand briefly over his heart. Nathan gave her a nod. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for all of it." Mia stepped into the jet bridge, head high, stride sure. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. By the time Mia Johnson's heels touched the polished tile floor of the New York terminal, her name was already echoing across the country. In just a few hours, the video Ryan posted had exploded. 10 million views on X, over 20 million on TikTok, and countless re-uploads on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. The hashtags Maya Johnson, Flying While Black, and First Class Justice were trending in over 30 states. Major networks aired the footage in prime time. Talk shows buzzed. Podcasts lit up. What started as a vile moment of airborne racism had become a national reckoning, an unmistakable reminder of how far the country still had to go. But this time, the ending was different. This time, the woman who was humiliated didn't walk away in silence. She stood tall, and the world stood with her. Back in Philadelphia, Ava and Ethan Harper's reality collapsed like a house built on sand. They returned home to a swarm of reporters waiting outside their gated estate. Neighbors, once friendly, now stared with disapproval. The backlash was swift and brutal. Their luxury real estate firm, Harper Estates, lost 3 of its biggest contracts within 48 hours. 2 national developers announced immediate terminations. Brand ambassadors cut ties. A celebrity client posted, "I won't work with racists. Simple as that." Ava tried issuing a public statement, calling the incident a misunderstanding. But no one bought it. The slap, the bribe, the sneering words. It was all on camera. The footage didn't lie, and neither did the disgust on people's faces. Ethan filed for damage control, but it was too late. Investors pulled out. Their company stock plummeted. Legal notices poured in. Soon, bankruptcy filings were underway. Friends who once attended lavish parties at their Hamptons mansion stopped calling. Family distanced themselves. Ava's sister issued a statement condemning her behavior. Ethan's own brother posted, "This is what unchecked privilege looks like. I'm ashamed." And just like that, the Harpers went from elite to exiled. Nora's story followed a different but equally painful path after being terminated by the airline. Her name quickly made its way through industry blacklists. No airline wanted the liability, no hotel, no private charter service, no luxury lounge. One viral thread detailed how she'd accepted a bribe and violated passenger rights. Her license to serve was suspended. She applied for jobs outside aviation, retail, hospitality, office work, but every background check led back to the incident. The internet doesn't forget. She became a cautionary tale. And in interviews, when asked what she regretted most, she didn't say the bribe, she said, "I underestimated who she was." But Mia didn't care who people thought she was. She knew exactly who she'd always been. In the days following the flight, Mia gave one, and only one, interview on her own terms, sitting across from a respected black journalist. She told her story not as a victim, but as a witness to change. "I didn't speak up because I wanted revenge," she said. "I spoke up because I've seen too many people who look like me, walk away in silence, afraid they won't be believed. This time, I wasn't going to let that happen." The interview aired nationally and was viewed over 15 million times within 2 days. Older viewers sent letters. Younger ones sent videos thanking her. Women across all backgrounds praised her composure, her clarity, her courage. Then came the lawsuit, filed swiftly and publicly. Mia's legal team charged Ava Harper with assault, emotional distress, and defamation. The case made headlines across the country. Ava's legal team tried to spin it, offering vague apologies, suggesting pressure and miscommunication. But the judge wasn't swayed, nor was the public. The evidence was clear. The slap, the insults, the discriminatory language. Everything had been recorded, and under mounting pressure. Ava settled. The figure was never officially disclosed, but sources close to the case confirmed it was in the multi-million-dollar range when asked what she would do with the money. Mia didn't hesitate. Give it back to the people who need it most. She launched the Denise Johnson STEM Scholars Fund, named after her late mother, who had raised 3 children working night shifts at a hospital. The fund provided full-ride scholarships for Black high school students pursuing degrees in science, technology, engineering, or aviation. Mia's announcement broke the internet. Donations flooded in. Major universities offered to partner. Celebrities pledged support. The scholarship became a movement, and Mia, once just the woman in seat 2A, was now the face of a national effort to build equity through education. Meanwhile, Ryan, the passenger who had filmed the original video, found his own life changed. The video that went viral earned him recognition. But what mattered more was what he did next. With Mia's encouragement, he started a nonprofit media project that amplified stories of injustice and resilience in everyday life. He received a grant from a civil rights organization and began working with young creators, helping them share stories from their communities. The ripple effect was undeniable. What began as a moment of pain turned into a chain of healing. But Mia didn't stop there. Using her 10% shareholder status in the airline, she requested a board meeting, and when she entered that boardroom in Midtown Manhattan, she didn't come with demands. She came with data. She presented reports on racial bias in air travel. She brought testimonies from other passengers of color who had been profiled, mistreated, or dismissed. And then she made her proposal: mandatory anti-bias training for all flight crews, updated passenger interaction protocols, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination in the air. The room was quiet when she finished. One executive cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson, we should have done this years ago," she replied. "Then let's not waste one more day." The board voted unanimously to adopt her plan. And just like that, policy changed, not because of a protest, not because of a lawsuit, but because one woman refused to leave her seat. Mia returned home to Detroit for a weekend of rest, stepping into the same modest brick home where her mother once juggled 2 jobs to keep the lights on. She stood at the kitchen table, now worn but still sturdy, and smiled. "We did it, Mama," she whispered. "We did it." The world had tried to humiliate her in a first-class cabin, but she left that cabin having elevated the country's conscience. The world didn't forget Mia Johnson, and not because of the slap, but because of what she did after. In the weeks that followed the viral flight incident, Mia didn't fade into headlines. She became a force. While most people would have taken the settlement and moved on, Mia moved forward, with intention. She had tasted something deeper than justice. She had felt the weight of a moment heavy with meaning, and instead of letting it pass, she transformed it into momentum. Her voice, measured, clear, and unwavering, began echoing far beyond that first-class cabin. It reached boardrooms, classrooms, communities, and newsrooms, and every time she spoke, she reminded people what dignity in the face of hate looked like. She didn't need to scream to be heard, she just needed truth, and the world listened, using her 10% ownership stake in the airline. Mia worked with the board of directors to implement sweeping reforms. The Flight Equity Initiative was born, an internal task force that created mandatory anti-discrimination training for all airline personnel, from flight attendants to ticketing agents to pilots. The policy wasn't just performative, it had teeth, a three-strike disciplinary system, monthly audits, and real consequences for violations. The airline also created a new advisory council made up of diverse voices, passengers, employees, and civil rights advocates, who reviewed internal practices and complaints. Mia insisted. We cannot fix what we won't admit, and we cannot lead what we won't understand. Her leadership wasn't about revenge, it was about redesign. She made it clear that justice isn't loud, it's lasting, at the same time. The Denise Johnson STEM Scholars Fund received an outpouring of donations. Within a month, over $4 million had been raised. High schools across the country began submitting applicants. Universities pledged to match scholarships. Mia appeared at town halls in Detroit, Newark, Atlanta, and Chicago, often standing beside young black students who, for the first time, saw themselves reflected in a tech mogul who looked like them, spoke like them, and never apologized for it. I'm not here because I was lucky, Mia told one auditorium of seniors. I'm here because I was prepared, and now it's your turn to prepare. I will invest in your future because someone once believed in mine. Ryan, the man whose footage shook the internet, stood beside her at one of those events. His small non-profit, Truth in Transit, had grown rapidly. With Mia's backing, it became a platform for documenting untold stories of discrimination and resilience in public spaces, airlines, restaurants, police stations, schools. He trained young people to film responsibly, share ethically, and protect truth. One viral moment had changed his life, but it was Mia's integrity that gave that moment its meaning. She turned pain into policy. Ryan told a reporter, "That's power." Meanwhile, Harper and Nathan, the two white passengers who stood up for Mia on that flight, continued to be vocal allies. Harper wrote a heartfelt op-ed in the New York Times titled, "I Didn't Stay Silent This Time." It went viral. Nathan began volunteering at local diversity education programs in his city. They admitted their past blind spots. They vowed to do better, not because they were praised, but because Mia had modeled something stronger than protest. Principle. She gave them a chance to become better men, and they took it. As for Ava and Ethan Harper, the consequences didn't end with bankruptcy. Their social circles shrank. Their names became cautionary examples in corporate seminars and HR trainings. Ava tried to reclaim her image, but the slap was now a symbol of arrogance, entitlement, and unrepentant racism. Meanwhile, Nora disappeared from the public eye. She reportedly moved out of state, seeking a new life, whether she changed or not. No one really knew, but Mia never mentioned her name again. She didn't need to. The lesson had already been taught. Mia's company, Autotech Innovations, continued to soar. Her electric vehicle battery breakthrough, a core reason for her trip that day, was unveiled at the New York press conference just 3 days after the flight. It was a clean energy marvel that would extend battery life by 40% and cut charging time in half. Major investors swarmed, international partnerships formed. But even as headlines praised her tech genius, the media couldn't separate her innovation from her integrity. She wasn't just a brilliant mind, she was a moral compass. And then came the final moment that sealed her legacy, 1 month after the flight, as she exited JFK Airport for yet another business trip. She was met by a surprise. Lining the terminal were dozens of travelers, airline staff, and young students holding signs. "Thank you, Mia. You made us proud. You belong in every seat." Applause broke out. Cell phones rose. But this time, the cameras weren't capturing injustice. They were capturing honor. Mia smiled softly, hand to her heart. She didn't wave wildly. She didn't speak, She just nodded and walked through the crowd, strong and silent. The moment needed no words. The world already knew. She stepped into her car, took a long breath, and whispered to herself, "Not bad for a girl from Detroit." And with that, the car pulled away. No red carpets, no drama, just purpose. Because when you carry yourself with truth, dignity, and grace, no one can take your seat. Like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. Thanks for watching. Your support means everything.